Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 49 of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Erzman, and I'll be your host today. And we are continuing this series where we're getting to know the speakers who will be speaking at our USMB convention this summer. And today I'm excited to introduce you to Pastor Jeff Bell. He's the pastor of Mosaic Church in Littleton, Colorado, over there near Denver. And man, I really loved getting to know Jeff. We're continuing to talk about evangelism and some kind of different ways that we can reach out to our friends and neighbors that may not know Jesus. And, you know, we kind of all have our own flavor, our own personalities and our own preferences when it comes to evangelism. But I was just kind of right in step with Jeff. I love how he and his church handle evangelism. They've got kind of what I would consider kind of a unique approach that I just really, really enjoyed. And I think we could all learn a lot from him. So let's dive right in. Let's take a quick break to hear from a sponsor and get right to my conversation with Pastor Jeff Bell.
Deciding on the right college is a big deal. At Fresno Pacific University, they get it. They are a private, nonprofit Christian university where your academic success is their priority. The Mennonite Brethren roots run deep from the classroom to the field. Professors connect you to research and internships. Financial aid makes your education affordable, and with their 4-year guarantee, you'll graduate on time to launch your career. Visit fpu.edu for more information about their undergrad, graduate, and degree completion programs. Fresno Pacific University. Possible happens here.
All right, my friends. Well, today I'm excited to introduce you to, if you don't know him yet, Pastor Jeff Bell, joining us from Littleton, Colorado. He is the lead pastor at Mosaic, been there for, I think, about 3.5 years. And we're in this series where we're kind of getting to know the convention speakers, and Jeff will be speaking at our convention coming up here this summer. So, Jeff, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Grateful to have you with us.
Well, I'm honored, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, you're at Mosaic there in Colorado. If people listening aren't really familiar with your church, we chatted for just a minute. It's got a pretty cool story. So tell us about Mosaic and what led you to being in your role there?
Yeah, Mosaic, we're here in Denver. We're actually in Littleton. So some of you might know the name Littleton from Columbine, a couple decades ago. And so it's a story, it's a community that's experienced some brokenness, some fractures, some pain throughout the years as a result of that. And as we had been in Orlando prior to being here. And as we came here, we came to a church that had experienced its own brokenness prior to Leslie and our family. That's my wife and our children moving here in the summer of 2018. There had been some moral failure in the previous leadership. There's actually just a shattering of it to the key senior leadership, sharing in the same week that they needed to confess some sins, some moral failure, and it nearly put the church under. Just a great church, a long legacy, 60+ year history, but it put it in a really challenging place. Leslie and I have multiple times in our ministry experienced God affirming our abilities to come into a place with restoration and run into maybe like a building that's on fire and put a helmet on and put the hose in our hand and let's go in and try to put the fire out. And sometimes you're going to get 3rd-degree burn when you do something like that. It's at the risk of stinging you a little bit, but we've also seen the beauty of watching God rebuild something beautiful and new. And so about 2 years ago, we actually changed the name of the church to Mosaic. And Mosaic, if you are familiar with the idea, it's all these broken, fragmented pieces of glass that honestly by themselves can be pretty dangerous. But when you bring them together, something beautiful happens. And we just have seen that happen in our church. What fuses all those broken pieces of glass together, at least in our mind from our Mosaic here at our church, is stuff that you read about in Ephesians chapter 4, where it says we are one faith, one baptism, one Lord, one hope, one love. There is a unity that we feel that God has just made something really beautiful. And the whole purpose of it coming together, when you think of like a stained glass mosaic, let the light shine through, and it just something beautiful happens. And so it's been neat to see what God's done in we're coming up on almost 4 years of being a part of the story here, and feel like there's some great new expressions of the church forming in our community as a result.
Very cool. It sounds like Mosaic's just a perfect name for your church. I love that. That's pretty cool.
The name means a lot, and we have a phrase, kind of our slogan is broken, made new. And we got t-shirts, all that. It's just a phrase that kind of became one of our mottos, recognizing that if that's true for a church, and that's true in a community, that can be true in my own life as well. And so a lot of people have latched onto the name. Yeah. Oh,
that's very cool. Well, as you mentioned at the top here, you're going to be speaking at the convention, and this year we're kind of focusing on increasing our impact to reach the lost. Evangelism is kind of what this whole conference is going to be about. So let's chat about that a little bit. So I don't really know much about your personal story. How has evangelism shaped you as a person? How is it kind of talk about how it's involved in at Mosaic? Just what does evangelism mean, and what's kind of your just some background when you hear that word? What comes to mind?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. First, let me say too, I'm just honored as can be to be a part of the convention this summer. Humbled, looking really forward to get to know a lot of the people that make up this community called the Mennonite Brethren. So really excited. And part of my own story, I grew up in a Baptist background. My dad's a pastor, and so from youth, faith has been a real key part of my journey. But I think where I deviated a little bit is part of my background was a lot of churches, particularly I think it's a generational thing. It may be some of the culture I grew up in. It felt like the church was primarily for those who are already in the church, which there's a place for that. Yeah. But what gets lost in that is, I guess I would say that it's the separation of evangelism and discipleship. Sometimes there's so much focus on just discipleship that you forget that you can't have true discipleship without evangelism. They're two sides of the same coin. And so as I grew up, some of the things I think God just cultivated a heartbeat in myself. My wife, Leslie, carries this as well, is a real heart for the people on the outside, looking out for the left out, looking out for the outsiders, if you will. Yep. And so, and that was expressed even in my childhood, different things I can remember being in school or different buddies who maybe would have been pushed on the outside. And for whatever weird reason, I just felt drawn to trying to make them feel included, not just from a social standpoint, but an opportunity to help them because of the expression of my faith, knowing where that's anchored. Just no, you're beyond the freshman in high school you are right now that feels like you're always getting beat up. Your identity isn't found in that. You've got more story. So some of that just got shaped in me in a young age. It shaped a lot of our ministry since then, but even now at Mosaic, we've identified some core values. One of our core values that probably is closest to my heart is our core value called welcome home. I know a lot of churches will use that language, but I mean, we really mean it. And we actually did a series last spring called Welcome Home. We had a big kitchen table up on the platform. And what we did was we started trying to figure out what are the different groupings in our city or in our community, in our region, that often feel like they're on the outside looking in, that there's not a seat at the table for them. Yeah. And it really started pivoting both our posture and our language to where like we want to be that church that is focusing on people outside the walls and trying to wrestle with, we don't have all the answers, by the way. We're stumbling through this. I know there can be a lot of tension points on this, but the people that get pushed aside by the church, who the church ought to be doing everything we can to express love and reach, following the map of what Jesus told us, go out and compel them to come in. There's a seat at the table for them. This isn't our table, it's his table. We can't believe we get to be a part of it, and we want to welcome anybody we can. It's really changed the culture of our church quite a bit to where we're seeing more diversity. We're seeing in race, we're seeing more people who have broken stories that often have felt condemned or judged by the church coming in. Hey, we haven't dipped any colors, we haven't dipped any flags on where truth is in the scripture, but we've really leaned into this idea of grace and truth, help them get to the table through evangelism, through our stories, through missional living, and then let them know who Jesus is. Let Jesus change them from the inside out. Yeah. So it's probably shaped from our youth, things that I saw, stories, individuals that were impacted by that. It's cultivated a heartbeat that I have for the outsider. And I think we're seeing our church really begin to gravitate to that. And man, there's fruit that's coming from that. A lot of the growth that we see in our church right now, there's always going to be some transfer growth. There's been a lot of crazy because of the pandemic over the last couple of years, but a lot of our growth is coming from people who had either given up on church or never really engaged with church, never engaged with the faith. Yeah. And they're being drawn not just to the preaching that happens on a platform in a room on a weekend, but they're being drawn by the message that's being proclaimed in their neighborhoods, throughout the city and throughout the week. So it's been pretty cool to see that become part of our culture.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Obviously, when you read the New Testament, especially, like Jesus almost exclusively hung out with the outsiders, right? Yeah. Like that was kind of his reputation. Yeah. And I know that like the kind of modern church doesn't have a great reputation for that. Like you just mentioned, a lot of people don't often feel very comfortable in church. Some people on the outskirts kind of feel pushed away. Yeah. But I know like I'm not sure how old you are. I feel like we're probably fairly similar in age. Like this kind of emerging generation really has a heart for those on the outside. At least it just kind of seems like that's more of a conversation. Why do you think that is? Like, why did that separation kind of happen, and
Mm.
what has led you for that to be kind of like a passion of
No, I
yours?
appreciate it. That's a great question. Two things that come to mind. I'm thinking of like when I grew up in the 90s where everything was just excess, right? And
Yeah.
so you got the real attractional model. Now as a church, we want to be attractive, but we don't
Hmm.
chase being attractional. We
Yeah.
think the gospel and Jesus and love and all that he brings is attractive enough, right? We
Hmm.
still do all we can to make it an environment that is inviting. But I think the church in, let's say, the 90s and the mega growth of all of it had a lot of attractional shaping to it that just became so excess that, and the tensions that the younger generation, I felt this even at that age, but now the newer generations are like, man, that's a facade. That's a
Hmm.
house of cards. There's straw man stuff going there. I mean,
Yeah.
there's such a disconnect between the display or the show that we see a church try to be versus how it's truly being lived. I can't connect with that. I live in a broken
Yeah.
world mess.
Right.
I can't connect with any of that. The other tension in that is, we used to live in Orlando before we were here. Church can't compete with Disney World. The church can't
Right.
compete with anything that can be produced. And we shouldn't. We've got something actually better than what they offer. We just fall into that trap of thinking we've got to compete, right? And
Hmm.
so I think what's happened is whether it's millennials or Gen Z now, there's an attraction to, can you just give me something real?
Hmm.
Again, back to our phrase, broken made new at Mosaic. It's like when I have conversations with people about faith, I rarely have to convince them that they're broken, that
Yeah.
there's
Right.
sin. I think we all know that inherently. What they need is a church that's not just barking at them and screaming at them about the darkness in the world. They need a
Hmm.
church that shows them that even in the middle of the darkness, there has been light. You can
Yeah.
experience light. In fact, when your life is transformed and changed, Jesus even calls you yourself the light of the world. You're part of this with me now, and it gives a hope that I think I don't think the church. I think it was all intended well.
Hmm.
So I'm not trying to throw too much shade on some of in the church ebb and flow of it from generation to generation. We can
True.
swing pendulums too far in response to that. But I think we missed it. I think there's a shallowness that began to form. I think there was a consumerism that began to form. I think what I love seeing, and I love your point, Matt, is just the newer generations, again, millennials, Gen Z, and younger. They're aching for something more real. There's something that I love things that I've seen in some of the Gen Z. We got an amazing student ministry at our church. Man, they will take the shirt off of their back for each other, it seems like,
Hmm.
in the name of Jesus, for the sake of the gospel. And I'm
Yeah.
just so inspired by some of that. And, whether it's Tom's shoes or mosquito
Hmm.
nets for um, mission work in Africa or digging wells, it's like, and it's not just a social gospel, but it's a step towards the gospel that let's demonstrate it as we're speaking it. And so
Yeah.
I love what I see in the church. I think we're seeing great expressions of that. And the other thing I was going to say too, in fact, I'm actually going to be talking about this a little bit this weekend at Mosaic, is I think those who grow up in a church culture, um, meaning well, or even moms and dads or grandparents, certain generations that are trying to protect the church, however you want to refer to that, but they
Hmm.
often see the church as a field. And the idea is, man, get in this field, or another analogy might be an aquarium or something, like get the fish in the aquarium or whatever, but get in this field, and man, you put all your programming there, you build your family calendar around it, get your
Hmm.
kids in this, get your students in this. There's a place for that. Again, there's good discipleship. I think Jesus called us, instead of being a field, we're a force that goes out to the real field. And I
Yeah.
think there's just a recognition of the churches, the gates of hell will not prevail against this. And
Hmm.
when you think of that phrase, the gates of hell, it's like hell is that, those are defensive things. They're putting the church is supposed to advance on the work that the enemy has done. And so
Yeah.
rather than being a field, I think the church more and more, I love when I see the church focusing on being more of a force, a missional force, uh,
Yeah.
with gospel sharing, evangelism, and all. So
Yeah, I like that a lot. So I think probably most churches listening, and mine, I work at a church, we're definitely included in this. I think a lot of us, probably because of the culture of the 90s and early 2000s, we're all kind of like, there's this funnel that seems to push us towards what you're talking about, where we have
oh
the
yeah,
field or the aquarium. Like, you
yeah,
have to have great Wednesday night stuff. You have to have great student kids stuff. You have to have events, and you have to have like, there's just this pressure to have all this stuff, right?
yeah.
So especially from like an evangelism perspective, what does that force look like? Like, when you're talking about the force versus the field,
Yeah,
what does that look like? How can we do better at that?
absolutely. Yeah. And just to be clear, man, we all feel that tension. None of us
Mhm.
drift towards life on mission. We want to
Right.
drift towards what's comfortable, safe, familiar.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a tension that we're still navigating. I think we always will. But I think some of it, from an organizational standpoint, then an individual standpoint.
Sure.
Organizationally, or as a church, we're doing things that frankly sometimes aren't popular with some of our established that I dearly love, but there's some generational values that are, apple carts get turned over in some of this. For example, setting a table up on a stage and having conversation around was a little jarring for people. So we're elevating the conversation on the weekend. Beyond that, we don't want it just to be slogans or a weekend conversation. How do we live this? We've actually, give you an example, in the last year, of course, 2020 was involved with a whole lot of weird weekends and shutdown, but 2021, as we were able to open up more, there were 3 weekends. We did a full weekend where rather than gathering as a church and meeting in an auditorium in rows like everybody else does too, we took a weekend and did a whole serve day. And we had close to 700 adults come out with, I think it was like 42 or 43 different projects throughout the community. All of us were in our church. We did a big rally thing out in the lobby. Charge, go, let's go live. The challenge I gave that morning was, rather than hearing a message, let's go be the message. And so we went out and with gospel in hand, again, demonstrating the message, but also with opportunities to leave things. We had set up partnerships, leave information packets, everything from, putting boxes of food for the homeless, serving and painting at schools. A lot of churches have done those kind of things, but we were really strategic about replacing a Sunday morning service with this. And that raised a few eyebrows. It's a little challenging, but I'm like, if you think about it, we have an opportunity at a time when everybody's out of work right now, because nobody's on Sunday at work, and nobody usually work. Not a lot of people don't work on Sundays. I'll put it that way. They have the weekends off. A lot of people are without jobs and stuff. They're watching the church in action. They're watching the church distributed. It was pretty powerful. 2 other weekends that we did 2 different block parties. Again, I love our worship experience. I love the gathering of the church. So don't hear me trying to deconstruct all that. 49 other times last year we gathered like every other church does. But the other 2 times, in total 3 times, and we had block parties in the parking lot, outdoors, set up all the stage, everything, canvassed the neighborhoods. We went old school on some of that. What was amazing, our church, we're in the neighborhood of about 1,000 or so that would normally gather, but that weekend, and we'll typically see 4 or 5 guests on a normal weekend.
Okay.
Each of those events, we saw over 20. We had 22 different families, which is pretty significant for the size of the church and in the climate we're all in right now. 22 families. That was the first time they came, which was so exciting to me because they're giving the church a chance in a culture where there's so much polarity and everything. But B, I felt like there's families in our church that are getting this. They are going out, they're inviting, they're living their faith in a way that's attractive enough that their friends are saying, okay, you've spoken to me, you've invited me. I want a little bit of a taste of what you've experienced. And we've seen people, really, that wasn't just a one and done. We've seen people engage in our church, in our student ministry, in our children's ministry. We just had we call it connection point, but last Sunday we had 22 new people. It's like a new get to know the story of Mosaic, whatever. We had 22. We do this about once a month. And 2 of the families that were there, their first connection was that. So we're trying to be strategic organizationally on that. Personally, we might get into it in a second here too, but personally, Leslie and I have been real intentional about trying to carve out, even sometimes that we'll say no to church opportunities or church gatherings that are happening to do things with our neighbors instead. We just feel like that's where God wants us in some places. And that's not always popular. But again, we're just trying to live that life on mission. Again, back to the force versus the field. The field can gather or the church can get. We want to be a part of that. But there's times we want to continue to model being a force in the community around us. And just real quick, because I'm just examples, I'm sure, but there's multiple other examples that we do in the community. Whether what we have tried to do is there's a great book, Church Unique by his name's slipping me right now, but it's Church Unique. It gives you the convergence. You try to, it's like a Venn diagram. You try to figure out, what is our church family, the gifting, the story of who we are. What does my heartbeat and other leadership in our church, what does our heartbeat fast for? And then what's the need in the community? And you identify, this is what shapes our church. Well, when you put that even through like an evangelistic or life on mission kind of a filter, it helps you try to say, where are the touch points in the community that we can, for the sake of the gospel, integrate into? And so there's numerous places. There's a school of the deaf nearby. We're the only church working with them, 180 families involved that are impacted by that. So we've got numerous people who are learning sign language because they want to be able to even sign the gospel, if you will.
Yeah, that's cool.
Gospel. caste is a local thing with sex trafficking that we're involved in. That's surprisingly, that's more prevalent even here. Saw that in a lot of Orlando, but we see that in major cities across the country, Denver included. Obviously homeless work, tutoring after schools. We got partnership with 2 schools in the area. So it's a lot of things that churches, I'm sure, are doing, but those are some of the expressions that we found specifically uniquely in our area to be a force in the community that gives us those channels, those relational, upfront, close, and personal opportunities to be the gospel and then share the gospel. So
yeah,
it helps.
I love that, man. That's great. I love that. I can tell it's just part of the church's DNA to do that kind of stuff. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm really interested in some of the personal stuff you were just talking about, like you and your family. But before we get there,
sure.
One thing you said that I wrote down is when you do some of these service projects and stuff,
yeah.
Something you said is you take the gospel in hand with you when you're doing these things.
Yeah.
And I think that's always a tricky thing. I want to hear you talk about this because you want to like authentically serve and give just because that's what we're called to do. Right. But we're also evangelizing and we're not shying away from that.
Right.
So how do you effectively evangelize without showing up somewhere with a track and here we did this good deed because we want you to come.
Yeah.
Like,
no,
how do you balance
things
that?
Attached if you're not careful. Yeah. And we feel that tension too. I think what we do, you kind of look in when you're in those opportunities, it's the person of peace kind of language a lot of people will use. It's like when they see this expression of love that they're not seeing it almost anywhere else in the world right now. I mean, as divided and polarized and vitriol that the world is just filled with right now, they're experiencing different expressions of love. I think the analogy I've used a couple of times is like it's inviting, a salesperson needs to make sure don't do a great sales presentation, but not give them an opportunity to sign on the bottom line, right?
Right.
One of those, you weren't a project, we didn't do this with the strings attached, but by the way, this is why we do this. Yeah. And if you ever want to know more, there's nothing forced. It's not like fill out an information card. If you ever want to know, here's just a gift. Really, it's actually been, we put like little packets sometimes together. It's just like, here's a gift. And if it encourages you and you just want to be a part of the story that we're a part of, this has impacted you, come be a part of the story. So yeah, you got to feel that tension of don't let it be a strings attached. Don't let it be a notch on a belt. It's more of a, man, if you're drawn to what we're drawn to, which I think everybody has that ache in their heart, they're drawn to purpose and love and acceptance and hope, especially with everything that seems to be going on right now. If they get a glimmer of that, my hope is that the Spirit has been working, that person of peace thing, that the Spirit has been working in their heart, that they're like, I'd like to taste a little bit more of that. So if that fleshes that out a little bit, that's kind of the posture we've done with that. But we've seen some great fruit from that. Partnerships, relationships form, people engage with different aspects of our church, and us being able to engage in things. There's actually it's funny, there's a couple projects that we're involved in now because people who were part of it were so moved by what was happening in the nonprofit that they were involved in, that we were serving at, that they're like, hey, I'm also involved in this. If you guys love in this way, would you be interested in maybe being a part of it over here as well? So it's actually it's a chance to expand this force, this movement, missionally, what the church should be. So, and it's a slow game, that too, man. None of this is like, I think that's one of the things that generationally has changed. We're not just doing bus ministry, go door to door, force the gospel down somebody's throat like they're just choosing a meal off of a menu or something here. It's a slow thing. There's a skeptical world for good reason. There's a lot of jadedism in the world right now. It takes time, and so it's infant baby steps over time that I think continue to cultivate the gospel around us.
And it's kind of a sad reality, but it's also just the truth that if your church lives that kind of life, like I think the community will be surprised. Unfortunately, I'm like, wow, these guys are the real deal. Like they mean what they're talking about. Okay, that's interesting. I should check this place out. So
that's one of the things we've said. Has there ever been? I mean, it's been such a dark, horrible, divided, polarizing time. Has there ever been a more challenging time for the church? Probably. I mean, sure. I mean, there's nobody getting burned at the stake in my church right now that I'm aware of, right? So, but at least in our generations, it feels like the most challenging. Man, turn that around. Has there ever been a more ripe with opportunity time for the church? Because to your point, Matt, the community is surprised when the church actually looks like the church that Jesus dreamt up and built and established.
Right.
It's just, hey, if you just do your marching orders, if you do the dangerous thing of going back and looking at what Jesus told us to do, it actually can change the world around you, and it surprises the world around you because they're not experiencing it. So
it actually works.
It's so funny when you run into that. It's like, this wasn't rocket science. We're just trying to do these marching orders that have been around for 2,000 years, but wow, our neighbors are surprised by it. Okay. So,
Yeah. And then we're surprised when it works.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
funny all the way around.
Great. Yeah. Jesus actually may have known what he was talking about. Wow.
Right. Okay, I want to get back to something you just kind of briefly mentioned. I want to dive into this. So we talked about kind of like some of your church's evangelism
Yeah,
strategies.
yeah,
I'd love to hear more about you and your wife, Leslie, like what you
yeah,
guys
yeah,
do. Because like you just mentioned that sometimes you guys make the choice,
yeah,
say no to a church activity
yeah,
so you can spend time with your unchurched friends. And I think that like the longer you're in ministry, the more you're in the bubble, right?
yeah, exactly.
If
Yeah,
your family are Christians, if your neighbors are Christians, if you work at a church and spend all your social time at a church,
yeah,
pretty soon you don't know anybody who doesn't
yeah,
know Jesus. And so
yeah,
I know like that's a struggle I have to like
absolutely.
fight against. So
Right.
talk to me, I want to hear more about that from your
I
perspective.
appreciate it. I just hope this will be encouragement to anybody who's listening that, man, pastors, church leaders, Christian leaders feel this tension deeply. Partly because you're right, there's just so little margin left after the role, and our role is so people centric and
Yeah.
people demanding that, shoot, by the time I get home from either the weekend or the office or whatever we've been a part of, I feel like I've just got a little bit left for Leslie and the kids. And then
Yep.
beyond that, I've got like slivers, if that, left for the neighbors. At
Right.
least that's how it's functioned for a long time. Well, Les and I have kind of tried to pivot that a little bit. Oh, and I want to be an encouragement. The other thing I was going to say about to pastors or leaders out there, you're going to have to choose this. You have to fight for this. People in your church will not do this for you. And what I
Right.
mean is, they're going to tell you, man, I want you to be an example of living missional, and I want you to be an example of bringing people to faith, but I want you to fill your calendar with me.
Right.
So,
Right.
and it's like, where do you want me to do this? And I don't see that with cynicism or jaded towards church. It's just the nature of it, because
Yeah.
people need cared for. They want to be loved. They want your time and attention and equipping in your life. So it's a good thing, but they
Yeah.
don't realize every time we're saying yes to something, inherently, we have to say no to a lot of other things.
Right.
Well, in our life, Les and I wanted to start saying yes to other things in some spots while we continue to try to say yes to the needs of the church. Some of the things, like, for example, God's put us in this neighborhood that is just, it's hilarious. I hope this doesn't bother or offend anything, but politics so often can get into church and stuff. When we had the election, like I said, we've been in here for 3.5 years. So the last election, when you look down our street,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not kidding, almost every house on the street had a Biden for president sign.
Yeah.
I don't ever put any political signs. I kind of joke with our church. I'm like, some of you don't even know who I voted for, and I love that. I don't want you, because I don't follow. My allegiance isn't to an elephant or a donkey. My allegiance is to a slain lamb, right?
Yep.
And so, and I just love that. It's not what that's not the flag we fly, but I loved it. So it's all around us. And so we know that, again, that to me, that's the category that fits. Like, a lot of times I feel like, well, the church isn't probably for me connected, because the church tends to, at least globally or nationally, kind of connect with the values that tend to be on one side and not the other.
Right.
And so we've just been super intentional. I'm just like, are you kidding? I don't need to move to Africa. I'm in a mission field right here. It's awesome.
Absolutely.
What we have found is very few people, and this may not be true in everybody's context, but at least in our context here, very few people don't have an association and understanding of the church.
Right.
There's too much
Yep.
television, movie, any books, anything that can talk about they've experienced it. Most of them have either a broken, the de-churched kind of a thing, or a very, I'm trying to think, like an ecumenical. They've just gone into a very mysticism or a very universalist kind of approach to their faith in God, which is so fun. And I hope that doesn't sound weird, but it's so fun to have conversations that frankly sometimes can poke holes into my own faith journey, that I'm like, hey, I'm just giving my Sunday school answer on this.
Yeah.
This is real to some of these people. I better make sure I understand the depth of, because they've really wrestled with it too. So all that to say, so what's happened relationally with some of our neighbors, I'll tell you 3 major things that I can think of that we've done. We had a church event last summer, a family event in the parking lot. It was huge. It was really cool. It was called Bikes and Bubbles or something, and just kids bringing their bikes, and it was almost like bike car wash. It was just a ton of fun.
Okay.
I stopped by for 15 minutes. I normally in the past I'd be there all day, because I feel like I'm supposed to be one of the first people there. First, I just wanted to cheer for everybody's involved. But Leslie and I, we had already scheduled our neighbors do a block party. And we were like, hey, we're not doing the church event. We're going to go spend time with our neighbors. And there's, dozens of families that we can block off the end of the street. It's really kind of cool. We don't even do it. We just show up and be part of it. And oh man, it was so powerful to just be able to sit there and have relational connection with them in some real personal, some deep ways. And another thing that we've done is, so our neighbor next door, she was disabled, chronic illness. She actually just passed away in was it July or August, whatever, last summer, after a prolonged illness. But we started talking with the neighbors, and we found ways of like, how do we care for Lori next door? So everything from her lawn to clearing the snow. I bought a snow blower. I bought an extra large snow blower. I don't have a big driveway, but an extra large snow blower so I could have maximum time to start heating her driveway and other driveways. In fact, Bob, one of my other neighbors, who is again de-churched, grew up Catholic as a kid. Bob and Joanne next door, they have two sons. One of their sons committed suicide about 14 years ago.
Oh, wow. Just
have blamed God since. And they've had when we started being their neighbors, absolutely icy conversations where they, oh my gosh, a pastor moved next door to me. This is the worst thing they could possibly, right? And so it's interesting, like, how do you do spiritual conversations from evangelism? You don't sometimes. I would say, don't feel the pressure. You live it. And so Bob one day is like, man, why did you buy such a large snowblower? And I already was ready for it, because I know Bob's the kind of guy who's always asking me. I'm like, Bob, I bought it for you because I'm going to help you with your driveway. We're going to help Lori with her driveway. And you just see these little chips of ice kind of fall off. So that was another thing. And then just a few doors down, Cookie and Curtis. Curtis is one of my buddies. He's got a Lutheran background. Hadn't been in church in probably 30 years, maybe 40 years. I mean, he's been decades. And he's my guy that a lot of times I don't initiate spiritual conversations with him. He initiates it with me now. And he'll come up to me at least every other week and say, hey, Jeff, how's the God business going? It just cracks me up when he says that. I'm like, it's going all right, man. And he has asked me so many challenging questions about faith, about where the church, like, who would be invited or welcome at your church, or what do you think about this topic and whatever. And it's just led to spiritual conversations. Well, the interesting thing is just about 2 months ago, his wife Cookie came down with some illness. Won't go into the details, but she had to have a serious surgery. And for the first time, Curtis is reaching out, texting me. Cookie's reaching out to Leslie. He's like, can you guys pray for us? Can you pray with us? Wow. And I mentioned, I won't just pray for you. I'll have our whole staff pray. Please, anybody you can get praying. These are people who have abandoned faith, given up on faith for decades, and they're seeing it. And I feel like it just traces back to the thing of, we're trying to carve intentionally in our life space to be with these people. As soon as I'm done with this with you, the very next thing, you can pray for me. I got to go outside. We got about 8, almost 9 inches of snow now that we got overnight. I'm going to be probably for the next two hours clearing their driveway. Cookies and Curtis's, getting out there. Bob will join me. I know he'll do this. We don't have to. He'll join me with a shovel. He'll do the little spots I can't get. And we're in relationship with them that is leading to spiritual conversations. Oh, and I got to tell you one more thing. So Bob and Jody next door, who have been in church and forever, they worship with us online now. And Bob and I'm sorry, I said Bob and Jody, Bob and Joanne next door. Joanne works in our food bank at our church. She's brought Lucinda across the street, who just doesn't even want to have anything to do with church, but she cares about the needs in the community. She comes and works in our food bank. Bob next door, who has just been hateful towards God. He has personally gone to hardware stores and fixed like the compressor that takes care of all of our food for the homeless that come in, all that stuff. I mean, they're doing things in the name of Jesus, and they don't even want to have anything. They're just walking toward it. It's unconventional in some respects. I don't think it's as formulaic as it used to be generations ago. It's long and slow, but man, it's been beautiful to see some of this stuff. So, how do you make people not feel like projects? Because isn't that a tendency? And we all, we're so, and I think it comes from a good posture. It's like, I care about your forever. And so I don't think it's wrong. My answer to that is, make them your friends. I deeply care about these people on my street. They're not projects to me. I mean, when Lori passed away, we cried. I got to have Lori's family Bible that she probably hadn't picked up for decades or whatever, and it's sitting downstairs, and it's a reminder of there's touch points in people's lives. And when they start seeing that you've got something maybe they don't, just be their friends. Don't make them a project. Just walk with them and be their friends. So that's something I was going to say. We just we genuinely care and love the people on our street. And that well. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I can just tell, like, it's just in your blood. I can tell. That's awesome. That's great. Okay, our time's going really quick here. I want to make sure we at least hit 2 more questions. I feel like we could talk about this for days probably. But so one thing you mentioned that, like, all your neighbors, so Curtis and Cookie and Bob and Joanne, and everyone's neighbors, everyone who's listening. In modern America, everyone knows who Jesus is, right? And a lot of people kind of in our age range grew up in Sunday school. They have a vague familiarity with like cultural Christianity, right? So in some senses, you kind of joked about not needing to go to Africa, right? like there's, in some senses, it might be a little bit easier to evangelize if people had no baggage,
Sure.
no
Yeah.
clue who Jesus was, no experience with church, good or bad. But since all of our neighbors
Mm.
at least know
Yeah.
something about Jesus, they know something about a church, they have an opinion.
Yeah.
And how do you start evangelistic conversations other than, obviously, like you just said, be their friend first? That's obviously very important. But since there is so much baggage, like how do you start with those kinds of
You're
people?
right. Yeah. And once you get past all that and you start getting to those really great questions, you start seeing, okay, they understand who Jesus is, but they don't know the real Jesus,
Yeah,
And
right.
so many things have put layers of veneer and filters over who the real Jesus is. Sometimes we're the most guilty of that, right?
Yeah,
And I just have I try to have a lot of grace on the church from generation after generation. The church is still flawed because it's full of people, right? And so
yeah,
we project our own opinions, our own interpretations of that. What I've done, it goes back to like Star Wars, Yoda. He's like, you must first unlearn before you can learn. I think
yep,
there's what I've found in a lot of the conversations is you have to deconstruct some of the preconceived, not just about like, hey, what does your church stand for? But you have to deconstruct who Jesus was and who Jesus stands for, or what
yeah,
Jesus stands for. You said it earlier. It's like when you really look in the Gospels and you look at the life of Jesus, he was so not just telling the guys to go be present with the outside or the marginalized or the ostracized. He himself was. He modeled that, and he took so much flack for it. He took
yeah,
so much heat, and we deal with that today
yeah,
sometimes. Part of the deconstruction is twofold. When you're having those conversations with your neighbors, walking through that, the other is there's people in church who are very seasoned in their faith in one level, but they're not mature in their understanding of who Jesus is. We're
yeah,
actually getting ready. We're doing a series called Churchology right now. It's really been rich for us to just gonna reconnect with the historical global church. But then we're
cool.
getting into what will be what I believe almost the rest of the year, an entire slow walk through the book of Luke. My initial plan was let's do Luke and Acts this year. Wow, that sounded like a lot. I don't think we're going to get to Acts. I think we're just going to go slow
Wow.
walk. I got a lot of people in church who are excited. Man, yeah, we're going to go slow. Like you're excited now, but I'm telling you, it's going to be real uncomfortable when we really get back and look at who Jesus, the real Jesus, because everybody knows who he is. But it's I did a series a couple of years ago called like, would the real Jesus please stand up? Maybe stealing that from Eminem a little bit, but it's just one of those. It's like we have even church and my neighbors and your kids and the professors at college or the teachers at school or the D church, everybody has their own perception. Man, when we do the dangerous thing of getting back to scripture and looking at the real Jesus and helping our neighbors do that as well, and wrestling through, because there's a lot of things I think the church can inadvertently have a posture that they stand against. And so people see, that's probably what you're about, Jeff, right? Or that's what Mosaic's like. No, we're about Jesus. We're Jesus centered. By the way, our mission statement is helping people experience a Jesus-centered life. So what's fun is just to spell that. Well, let me tell you what Mosaic's about. We help people experience a Jesus-centered life. And then you can get into the conversation talking about the real Jesus. So that's one thing. The other thing is the name of our church is not Mosaic Church. It's Mosaic, a Jesus-centered community. And oh my gosh, has that made some crazy questions because that's so untraditional. But the reason we did that is we wanted to be able to share with people. Sometimes words get hijacked. Church gets hijacked. Even though name Christian can get hijacked. At the end of the day, whatever your definition is, we wanted to say everything that we're about is about helping people experience Jesus. We're centered on him, a community centered on him. So that leads some of our conversations to continue to talk about who he is. You walk into our building right now, there's a massive banner above our building. You can't walk in without seeing it. It just says, helping you experience a Jesus-centered life. And so much of our teaching, our equipping classes kind of revolve around that. How do we help you have more? One of the phrases I've heard is, how do you make your normal conversations more spiritual? And how do you make your spiritual conversations more normal? Because it's so weird. And again, sometimes it's let the conversation come to you rather than you trying to force the conversation. Those are some of the things. So I can't remember if I'm answering the question, but I think what you're asking is like people around us know who Jesus is. They do, but they don't know the real Jesus. And so part of what we try to do in the conversation is the Yoda thing, deconstruct what they've had. You got to unlearn before you can relearn. So, and it's honestly surprising. I'll tell you, Matt, it's really been surprising because I think a lot of people are terrified, even people of faith. I can talk to people in the church about Jesus all day long. A lot of pastors can do that, but we have a hard time, even if we're paid to do this, talking to our neighbors about it. It has been so surprising that when you let the conversation come, and when you've demonstrated, it's so easy to talk. They surface it. They really do. I don't even have to like, all right, what are the 3 questions I'm supposed to ask to start a spiritual conversation? There's a spiritual conversation around us. Everybody's seeking, they're aching. They just don't, they think that they know where you already stand on issues because of what they've seen nationally or on the news or something, you get to show something new, and it just creates an intrigue. So
Yeah. Gosh, I love that, man. That's awesome. Okay, one more thing I want to make sure we spend at least a little bit of time on before we start to wrap up. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on what does like the current modern American church need to do differently? So like we've talked a little bit about like historically, at least in the past couple of generations, we're really focused on having a bunch of events, right? We got a bunch of kids stuff, we got a bunch of all this, which I think there's a really great side to that.
Yeah.
But it also leads to a bunch of families who, like we talked about, they only do church things, and then they don't have the time to be very available in their community. So I'm just curious, like what are some things that you have seen or have tried, or people listening, if they want their churches to be more evangelistic, what should we be doing differently?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. You're right. Yeah, your family calendar almost begins to build around the church calendar. We all become susceptible to that. We've tried to, from a church standpoint, organizationally, we try to have a very thin church calendar. Okay. And we try to get really strategic with it. Like I said, the block parties and stuff, that if we're going to have church-wide something, it's very helping you be outward focused and more of a come and see opportunity. When it comes to the go and be or the go and tell kind of things like that, back to instead of just being a field versus a force. Man, like one of our core values is share what you found. And I think what we've tried to do is like, what should the church be doing different? We've tried to just continue to point people and remind people of where they've come from, and realize that the only reason you experience your faith today is because somebody shared it with you, and somebody shared it with that person who shared it with you, and somebody shared. There's generational, forever, whatever. Yeah. Don't be that link that is broken, that doesn't continue to pass it on to others. And so we tried to challenge with kind of like I said, we had the Dave Runyon, if you're familiar with him, he did the book, The Art of Neighboring. He actually lived in the Denver area. He came and spoke a couple of years ago. And some of these neighboring things that I'm even talking about with our neighbor it just stirred my heart in a way that I wanted to model it better than what I had. And so that some of that language, a lot of us still have the magnets that he has in there, that you try to get your neighbors' names, start there. Some of us don't even know the names of our neighbors. How do we even impact their lives, right? So start there, and then just start praying and let God bring that person of peace on the street and all that kind of stuff. So there's been some intentional efforts like that. One of the things that we believe, so helping people experience a Jesus-centered life is our mission. We have marks that, like, if you're really experiencing a Jesus-centered life, this is like an outflow of your life. And one of those marks is you have influential relationships. There's a like one of the things the church needs to do different is we don't ostracize or become a ghetto, a subculture as a church. It's like, because that's what you think is like, as I'm growing in my faith, as I get more Jesus-centered, that probably means I'm further away from the lost. Oh my gosh, again, did you look at Jesus's life? No. So we want you to have those relationships, but rather than those relationships influencing you, you're the influencer in the relationship now. You've got the answer, the hope. The gates of hell can't prevail against that. You've got the way, the truth, and the life, right? Yeah. So there's little things like that we're actually in the process right now of even building some discipleship pathways that are helping people. Like, if you're part of Mosaic for 3 years or 5 years, and you've heard me talk on weekends, and you've been in life groups and everything, what difference does it make in your life? How do we help you have more influential relationships? So we're really actually working on some of the process. I think that's some of the stuff the church has to wrestle with. I have a friend in Orlando. His name's Joel Hunter, a national voice. He was my pastor down there before we came here to Denver. And I remember him, man, one of the phrases he would use that was so powerful to me is, pastors, church leaders, followers of Jesus, they need to get, we all have it. We all understand our interpretation of the Bible. And sometimes we spend so much time arguing it, whatever. He said, move beyond just finding your interpretation of the Bible to an imitation of how Jesus lived. Yeah. From interpretation to imitation is what he would say. And I'm challenged by that. And that's what I try to challenge our congregation, that we're in that journey. And I hope pastors, leaders, churches would be in that journey of, yes, biblical literacy, theology, it's all important, the interpretation of scripture. I think we got a pretty decent handle on that. We don't need to keep wrestling over and arguing over nuancing. Yeah. Let's wrestle with imitation better. And honestly, we have to be willing to get a little uncomfortable. It looks a little sometimes different than the traditional models that generations before of us have used. And what's interesting is a lot of those traditional models, let it be Sunday school or weekend gatherings or something like that, they came in response to some of the cultural needs at the time, or some of the cultural realities at the time. Let's look at our culture. Let's look at our communities. Let's look at where God's at work. Get on our knees. Let the Spirit infuse it. And let's become this incredible imitation or expression of Jesus. And it may need to look a little different. Yeah. Because what we're not doing is chasing numbers. We're not chasing budgets. Everybody knows this, but sometimes we're not willing to make the pivots that sometimes can be a little costly, but they can be really kingdom building in the world around us. So I just think it's a wrestle that we have to keep pushing on and get action. Don't just ready, aim, talk, argue. Let's go and do it imperfectly sometimes and get better at it. But
that
helps.
I'm reading a book right now where the author said, Jesus never said, figure me out. He said, follow me. Right.
Oh, that's good.
Like you just said, we get so stuck in arguing over theology that sometimes we forget what this whole thing's about in the first place.
Yeah. I just said, I don't have any energy for that anymore.
Right.
I think we've got the cardinal things landed. It's Jesus. This is the roadmap that teaches us about him. Let's go live it. Yeah. I believe in the eternal security of the believer. I'm like, I can't lose what I've got. I just want to give away what I got now. So
that's good.
Let's quit arguing over it and doing everything we can to get more. I honestly, Matt, I'm not one of those doomsdayist kind of people, and every generation probably feels this and should feel this. I really do feel like sometimes our time is short. I think we got to be really intentional about not continuing to tickle the ears of the already convinced that we love and we do life with, but trying to get out to people who are aching and hungry for any expression of hope, any expression of purpose and meaning and belonging, and that your life really does matter. And there is something beyond it, man. We just gotta, they're looking for it. It's an easy conversation that will actually come to you if you just let them be your friends. Just get in relationship community, say no to some other things that you may need to, so that you can say yes to this. It'll surprise you how easy these conversations can become.
Oh, that's great, man. Well, Jeff, I love your heart, man. I've never been to Mosaic, but I want to come.
Come on.
If I'm ever in Denver, I want to come check it out because I'm just really impressed with what you guys are doing. So again, our time went fast today. Is there anything that we didn't hit that you want to tackle before we wrap up today?
I would just say, again, number one, I'm really looking forward to, I'm going to meet a lot of people this summer because I just love the MB. I love Don. Tim Sullivan is our district minister, and Tim and Don are just some of the most beautiful people I've gotten to know. We love them. I was going to say, what's interesting I've thought about is here of course, in Colorado, we got the Rockies, we got these mountains. If you've heard of 14ers and 13ers and all that. If you've never climbed up there, and I've had an opportunity now to climb a few, and it's just such a rush. What won't surprise you is you're going to run out of oxygen and stuff. What surprises you if you've never done it, because you look at these mountains and they look like one big rock. It's just like one big piece of granite, right? What surprised me that I wasn't sure of or didn't know of is the closer you get to the top, the harder it gets. Because when you get up there, there's this stuff called scree. It's like gravel. And I mean, every step, it feels like everything's working against you. I mean, it's exhausting. But if you don't fight through the scree, man, you never get the joy of the summit. Right. And I would say that's the same way when it comes to evangelism and living on mission. I've noted the closer or the further you get in the conversation, the enemy's working, it's like, here's where the rubber meets the road, and you're going to fight, but you just continue. It's worth it. In relationships with friendships with neighbors or family members that are lost or coworkers that don't know Jesus, it can get awkward. It can get challenging and everything feels like it's working against you. Don't quit, man. The payoff is so worth it. Don't rob yourself and don't rob that person or those relationships of the joy of the summit. And so when I climb, I often am praying for neighbors and I see things like that. And it was to me, a real illustration of what the spiritual battle is. Sometimes the further we get into relationship with people, the enemy's at work. Don't give up. Keep pushing through. Don't back off. Let spiritual conversations come. Keep stepping into it, even when it feels like everything's working against. I think that is something that is so powerful in a world around us that isn't expecting that right now. So.
That's great, man. It's really encouraging, inspiring to hear from you, Jeff. So I think it's been challenging too. So thank you just for a good mix of encouragement and challenging content. That's been really good. So thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, man.
Now you got to go show us some drives. So you need to go tell Bob and Curtis.
You can pray for me because I do it begrudgingly. I just do it because I love the people around me.
I love it. Well, tell Bob and Curtis, Matt, and the MB family said hi. And
you got it. I will. Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
Awesome. Blessings.
Do you want to stay connected to news and information from within our Mennonite Brethren family? USMB offers several ways you can receive the most current news and updates. Sign up to receive Snapshot, a personal bi-monthly update from Don Morris, the USMB National Director. Snapshot includes information about important decisions and ministries within the MB family, along with ways you can join in prayer. You can also sign up to receive C-Link, an online bi-monthly newsletter featuring news and stories from the Christian Leader magazine. C-Link offers timely news so you can stay in tune with what's happening in our Conference of Churches. Sign up for both newsletters on the USMB website at www.usmb.org.
Okay, well, I know I say this a lot, but man, that episode went by quickly. I feel like we covered a lot of ground and a little bit of the drinking from the fire hose situation, at least on my end. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jeff as much as I did. And one thing I've been thinking about and learning about these days is that really, I think every person in every church probably handles evangelism slightly different. And I think one of the beautiful things is that each one can be effective, right? So maybe your church doesn't do things exactly like Jeff's does, and that's okay. There's a pretty good chance that you're probably reaching people that Jeff's church isn't, and vice versa. So I think there's room for all of us, and at the same time, we can learn from each other, right? So I hope you're able to take some of these things from Mosaic and Jeff and maybe see if they can implement well in your church and your community. And I just really loved a lot of his ideas. I think there's a lot of good things happening there. And so again, really grateful for Jeff and his time. And if you'd like to hear more, again, I'd encourage you to sign up to join us for the convention this summer. So head on over to usmb.org. There's a link right there towards the top where you can sign up. We'd love to see a bunch of you there to hear from Jeff and these other speakers that we're getting to know here these weeks on the podcast. So once again, many thanks to you for spending time with us today. Always grateful for you fitting us in your podcast rotation. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you again soon right here on the Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.